I was reading what I thought was a really bad interview with you. It was in print, and it goes about 5-6 years ago. And I was like, these are just really bad questions. She's got to be bored. She's got to be like, she's got to be just like, get me out of here type of thing. So, you were the one I really wanted to speak to.
That's really cool of you. Thank you, very much. I appreciate it, and I do like talking about rock and roll, and the fact, like Alan and Mark and Martha have been a little more diplomatic about MTV than me, but it's like, I can't even be diplomatic about it. It sucks.
Yeah,
It's like, how can I?
That'll be my trailer clip.
Yeah, you should use that. Yeah, how can I be diplomatic when the damn thing sucks?
Holy shit, man.
It's a bunch of crapola. Who watches this stuff? That's
crap.
my rant. Yeah, see, this person could deal with Frank Zappa. The one back years ago couldn't. Animal rights stuff, because that's my passion until this last election, and now it's become, fuck you.
Yeah.
It's like, get the guy out. What the fuck?
Yeah.
It's a lot of, it morphed into, because I can't keep quiet about the mess.
It's like conversations like this that I would love. It's like I'm doing these things, and it's like very specific things, like retro speak. This is for MTV, and then there's Rock Under Fire, and I have these these great conversations with people that don't make the cut. And I'm thinking about actually doing something called DERRICO Untitled, where I just have these, anything goes conversations, and just posting. Like this will be Nina Blackwood for retro speak, and then I'll put the whole fucking thing.
I've never been so angry or sworn so much in my entire life. I post stuff, but he's the guy.
Like your Twitter, you always have a couple of songs each day.
No, I don't do Twitter.
Not Twitter, not Twitter. Was it? What the hell am I thinking of then? That has are you sure you don't have a Twitter? Does somebody have a Twitter for you?
I do have a Twitter account, but I've never tweeted in my life.
Does somebody tweet for you? I just want to hit on just certain aspects of MTV's influence in the beginning, and just when it was most relevant. In other words,
Yeah.
So you have this entity in 1981 through which branches kind of extend outward in all directions, and it informs what we're going to listen to, and how we're going to look, and how we're going to dress, and how we're going to wear our hair for the better part of 2 decades. And it's all launched with the words, ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
Right.
Would that fly today? Would that introduction fly today?
Well, unfortunately, rock and roll is not at the forefront anymore with music. You kind of said that when we started speaking. It's much more of a pop world these days. So, I don't even think it could be said that
yeah.
rock and roll. And I really hate to say that, because I'm a rock and roller. I grew up with rock and roll. That's my favorite kind of music.
You grew up with WMMR. Was it MMR?
No, I was not with them. I grew up listening to them.
No, well, that's what I meant. You grew up listening to them in Cleveland.
Yeah, WMMS in Cleveland.
Okay.
Which was, for years, the number one rock channel. I keep saying channel. That's what we call them on Sirius. We call them channels. It's station.
Yeah.
Rock and roll station in the country. And Cleveland broke a lot of artists. So, I was really lucky that I grew up there, because that's where I heard, everybody, Bowie, from A to Z, they all played Cleveland, and I went to see all of them. I grew up listening to the station, but, that was, really until, the 90s, rock and roll was at the forefront, but, and then you got, rap, hip-hop, and pop kind of took over. Mm-hmm. And I'm really sorry about that. I really am. Rock and roll is just, it's, for real rock and rollers, it's in your soul. It's part of it. how can you even explain it? You know, it's just rock and roll or rock.
Yeah,
you know,
and at the time it was so big. Yet it was so big that it was the foundation of this channel that exploded.
Right.
That exploded in just a very short period of time. Now let me ask you, like, it seems to me that the first initial impact of MTV was in the first 18 to 24 months was that it brought in a second British invasion. It had in common like an extension of New Wave. You know, we had New Wave at the tail end of the 70s and into 1980 here in the States. And then it kind of fizzled out for a little bit, at least, you know, on the pop charts for a while. And then MTV comes into the picture, and you have this cluster of bands bringing in. It was like a much more, I guess, sweeter, soulful brand of New Wave. So you had bands like Duran Duran and The Fix and ABC, Flock of Seagulls.
Right.
Eurythmics.
Right.
The Thompson Twins. What was going on at the outset of MTV that the majority of those videos were coming from overseas?
Well, pretty much because Europe and especially, you know, the UK were making videos. They were ahead of the game. American bands weren't making videos, but Europe was making videos because they started out basically as a promotional tool within, like, the industry, and then that's how the seed came about for MTV, because, you know, the founders thought, you know, here are these promotional video clips. Why don't we have a channel that plays them? But they were basically industry promotional clips. They weren't for airing necessarily. So that's why it was kind of the supply was coming from over there. So they were head and shoulders ahead of the U.S. in making videos.
I remember seeing Tom Petty on Merv Griffin, and it was Refugee, and it just speaks to the fact that, like you just said, they were these disposable promotional things, and like probably meant to only be used once. And some artists, I don't know if Tom Petty spoke to this once, but it just, videos were this way out of having to actually appear on talk shows. And he was told he was going to be on Merv Griffin, but he didn't want to go. He didn't want to do the show. And it was just things you would see on talk shows and things like Solid Gold. I remember Solid Gold showed a lot of videos, but yeah, they just didn't seem to be taking the format seriously at first. And then again, MTV. Obviously, there's some growing pains. The first few years, the channel after its first year, I think, lost something like, the figure was something like $50 million. It sent executives scrambling around. They're appealing to celebrities like Mick Jagger and trying to get him to come on board for their ad campaign, which was very successful. You know, I want my MTV.
Right.
As VJs, how privy were you to the business end while all of this was going on? Were you showing up to work not knowing how much longer you'd have a job? Were they telling you that, this could go, we've reached a point where this can go one way or the other? What was going on? Like,
they
how
didn't.
much?
No. When I took the job, and you have to remember, a lot of people that weren't around at the time don't realize that cable was also in its infancy. It wasn't like it is now. So, when I'm going off to this video music channel on cable, we didn't know, if I'd be there 6 months or, as it turned out, 6 years, so it wasn't so, we just didn't know, it was a gamble, and everybody that worked there at the beginning, you kind of took it as that's why it was kind of like a pioneer situation. But, little by little, it was catching on in the middle part of the country, because it wasn't even in New York or L.A. when it started. It took a couple of years. And then once it did hit the major cities like New York and L.A., it was no stopping it. I mean, it was just, the train came out of the station. But on a day-to-day basis, no, we did what we were doing in the studios, which was separate from the offices. They were on 6th Avenue, and we were down, between 10th and 11th, for crying out loud. Really seedy part of town. So we just did what we were supposed to do every day, Of course, there'd be articles out, and we knew the channel wasn't making money. That was just the way it was. But we never, at least I could say for myself, I wasn't worried that, tomorrow I'm going to be out of a job. I didn't think of it that way. We figured there was so much passion, or I'll say I figured there was so much passion and forward motion with it that it would just keep going, just from sheer being tenacious, that it would keep. So no, I didn't worry. But the downside for us, I remember we needed advertising. That we all knew, because companies were very leery about buying time on a cable music channel for obvious reasons, right? And I remember I got an offer. It was for a skincare product through Procter & Gamble. And I was so excited because I was going to be like the spokesperson. And they were going to buy time on the channel. And I felt like the cat that came back with the mouse to my owner, like, look. And I could not believe it. They would not let me do it. And I'll never forget that, because I thought, but you need advertising. But nope, they didn't want to let me do it, and it was like, okay. So obviously, Procter & Gamble's pretty big. So I guess they figured that they could live without Procter & Gamble at the time and keep going. So that's kind of a long answer to the question. No, I didn't think that we were going to go under right away. Because when you have that kind of attitude, but don't you need advertising money?
Sure. That's what it's about. It's and as far as MTV getting that money,
it was kind of weird. I remember being very disappointed about that, because obviously I lost a lot of money. But
so did probably MTV.
That's right, and that I think. I actually, because I remember when the call came from one of the executives.
Well, probably for some exclusivity clause in your contract or something, right?
Well, there was, and I would never sign another one of those again.
Yeah.
That they had to approve of anything outside of MTV, but we did. We went through the channels, not meaning the channels, but the proper channels, I should say. Whether they could have said yes or no, and they could have easily said yes, and they said no.
You mentioned once in an interview about the occasional mismatching of artist and VJ, where if it wasn't the right pairing, it could lead to disaster.
Yeah.
Right. And right now, you and me are both thinking of Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
You know that. That aside, that period where MTV was being criticized for not playing enough black artists. Now, I wouldn't say that this was a case of being mismatched, but I mean the luck of Mark Goodman having to sit across from David Bowie that day.
Yeah, and again, I've got to still defend MTV about that. It was not a question of race. It was a question of musical genre.
You were a rock and roll channel.
We were a rock and roll channel, and because there were artists that were black that we were playing.
Sure.
Bill Linnet, Joan Armatrading, John Butcher Axis. It was just, there weren't that many black rock artists. So if the racism came about, it was kind of point to the record labels, not to us. So I can really say that I never, ever felt that it was a question of race whatsoever.
Yeah.
And truly, like Michael Jackson, was an R&B artist, a Motown R&B artist, but his music did start changing. I mean, with Eddie Van Halen, Steve Stevens, it got rockier. And, there have been so many stories about that whole thing with Michael Jackson and who said what. To be quite honest, I don't really know what the truth is because, there's just been so many different stories.
What's that in reference to?
Michael Jackson being played on.
Oh, you mean at first? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But
anyway, no, I did not feel it was a racist question. At all. And I would be, because I'm very sensitive about that, I would have been the first. JJ would have been the first, for crying out loud, to say something. I mean, but I would have been a close second, Say, wait a minute.
It's funny because I don't even remember that, and I used to watch a lot of MTV. We all did. It was, MTV. I was 11 years old in its first year. We didn't get it till like 1982, a year later, exactly 1 year after its, launch. So I don't even remember that being an issue. I mean, I don't know if maybe because I didn't, read the papers, or there was no internet and access to news didn't travel as quick. But word of mouth did not get around like that as much. So I remember hearing nothing about this and just looking back, years later, hearing about this.
And I was kind of surprised at that interview, that how Bowie really, he went to town. I mean, I felt, and it's forever ingrained on the internet, poor Mark. It's like one of those.
Yeah.
Wow.
That could have been that could have been any of you guys.
Yes, it could have. Yes, it could have.
Oh man.
And
that's why I was going to ask you specifically about Frank Zappa. That was just another bad one that I'm not going to.
Why
hold you to.
And I was so. I mean, now I swear, and I'm a lot, more. I didn't even swear. I was so sensitive.
Yeah.
I mean, it should have been Mark or JJ. It should have been, either one of those. Not Martha, not Alan.
You're like thrown into this pool of sharks, and they just told you to swim.
Yeah, and it's like, why is this person being so... And I knew about Zappa. It's not like, I didn't know that he was like, that he was. But when he's... I didn't have the tools at the time to come back at him. And it was... I compare it to a bully in a schoolyard picking on, the shy girl.
Yeah.
The wallflower. Yeah. Because that's basically what I was. I still am to a certain extent. Wallflower. I'm the one in the corner. It was just really unfair, and I know he was getting, he thought he was real funny, and it was really an unfair. I don't like bullies. Let's put it that way. And he was a bully.
Yeah.
Now I probably would have sworn at him and said, "Get the fuck
out of here."
But I've changed.
Yeah. We all do. Oh man, I don't know that he would have played JJ that way or Mark.
He wouldn't have.
I doubt that.
Mark, maybe he would have tried, but JJ, no way.
Yeah.
No way. You're talking about an ex-Marine? Hardly.
Yeah. Mark's seen some tougher shit. Mark was, if I remember correctly, he was in doing New York radio the night that he had to announce that John Lennon had been shot. So there are tougher things than Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
I have to put this one out there because we can't go through the trajectory of the early years without talking a little bit about Thriller. We know how it impacted the pop charts, the trends on the pop charts, album sales. What was the overall impact of MTV on videos in general? Because it was indeed a game changer.
Well, I think they got a lot more elaborate after that, and I know leading up to this event, the world premiere, oh my God, it was weeks and weeks, promoting this thing. It was like the second coming, it really was. Still, brilliant piece of film, brilliant music, the whole thing. So, as technology advanced and artists of all different, the directors, producers, choreographers, set designers, costume people. It just hit its stride in the mid-'80s. Video music is what I'm talking about, videos. There was so much creativity.
New videos became events.
Yeah.
Trailers and advertisements for weeks leading up to a world premiere video.
Yes.
And everybody started trying to outdo each other.
Or Peter Gabriel, the world premiere, we're going to... Yeah, but Thriller was, huge. Such a big event.
You once also spoke about seeing things up ahead regarding, let me think of how to phrase this one. The pieces, characteristics of what makes something so unique and special always turns a corner at some point. And it's usually when something hits its peak. The honeymoon always ends, so to speak. We could debate till we're blue in the face what that corner was for MTV. Some might say remote control. Some might say the beginning of the VMAs. Some might say the sale to Viacom in 1985. What changes did you see happening where you foresaw that what was up ahead?
Well, it actually was the last year that I was there. You could kind of feel it. Nothing real specific, because while I was there, remote control, I left before remote control. But I can't point to one particular thing while I was there, because I left in '86. And that's right about the time that it started changing. And to be quite honest, I was so busy with my jobs. I had like 3 gigs, simultaneously out in LA. So I was so busy, I didn't pay a lot of attention to MTV because
at that point where they were leaving you alone at that point, so you were doing other things and they tended to.
Oh, I left. No, I left. I left to take.
Oh, I thought while you were doing MTV in 1986.
Oh no! I left MTV in 1986. So it was before they had remote control. I think remote control might have started in '86. So I left before the major changes started, and was doing Entertainment Tonight, Solid Gold, a syndicated radio show through United Stations. So that's why I didn't really pay attention to MTV when I was gone, because I was too busy, to be quite honest. I was busy doing my own things.
Right.
So I can't really speak to, what happened after I left whatsoever. But when I was there, which kind of gave me the impetus to finally leave, it was just a feeling. You sensed that things were changing. You just sensed that it was becoming a little more restricted. Our roles as VJs, they started a whole separate news department. So the things that our duties kind of were getting lesser, if you can understand what I'm trying to say, because some of these,
it's almost like going from a
gold offer, and I had gotten a lot of offers that I said no to because I would have had to leave MTV and I wasn't ready to. It was like a family, and I go, no, not yet. And finally, with that, it's just a feeling I had inside.
Right.
That's when I finally said, okay, now it's time to graduate and go into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. But I know, the Viacom thing certainly had something to do with it. The original, like Bob Pittman left, the other executives who really were there, this was their baby. And even though they were on the executive side and the business side, they loved MTV. They loved the music. They loved everything about it. That's why they hung in there when it wasn't making any money. You don't do that if you don't have a passion for it. It's just not smart. So I think that's when it really started changing, and then they started the reality shows and all that. But, I'm not the person to ask about that on a daily basis because I wasn't there.
Right. MTV's current relevancy, quote unquote relevancy, has been questionable for the past 20 or so years, probably more. Does it continue to inform pop culture in different mediums now, or has it just become reflective of pop culture?
I don't even, I to be quite honest, I don't even know what the relevance, I know that sounds cold.
No, I agree with you. I just wanted to throw it out there.
I was talking to somebody recently, and this sounds terrible, but I mean, if it was still music-based, I would be watching it.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it's I could probably say something a lot. I could probably say something a lot more terrible. In a sense, it's just.
I don't even, to be quite honest, I don't even know what channel it is on the.
I have not. I had when I started putting this together. Somebody mentioned MTV, and I was like, that's still a thing. Like, is that still?
No, and they don't make any. I mean, they're not making any money. I was talking just recently about, I understand that it had to evolve and change, but it still could have been music-based and been successful, with different interview shows, on-site, kind of like what, I don't know if you listen to SiriusXM.
I do.
Kind of like what SiriusXM, the various channels do. They have the specials at the Apollo Theater, with whether it be U2 or a Tom Petty listening party, it still could have been doing those things. And if you want a couple of reality game show, whatever, fine. But to do away with what it actually started out as, music driven, to me makes no sense.
Where there's this culture of celebrities and where, at one time, where we had music and we had movies and we had all these different aspects of society and civilization and all happening at the same time. And you had things like the Star and the National Enquirer. But right now we're living inside the National Enquirer. It's kind of like MTV with the reality shows and making celebrities out of anybody. In a sense, it's become just another symptom in a dumbing down of civilization. That's just. I told you my criticism was much more harsh than yours.
I would have actually preferred that they just retired the name MTV. Just, okay, this was something cool that happened for a couple of decades. See you later. Than to use MTV for the crapola. For lack of a better term, but it's just
it doesn't even stand out anymore. It's just become another symptom of everything that's going on right now, of what's become of pop culture in general, I think. Unless I'm just one of those get off my lawn people at the age of 48. I don't know. I don't want to be that person, but it's.
No, you're not. I mean, both you and I love, rock and roll, and we love music. And if it was viable, why would I not watch it?
Yeah,
I would watch it. But how can I watch crap?
Yeah.
It's like I never liked reality, from the start. I just, because it's not really reality. Reality shows are documentaries. I barely watch TV anyway. I like to read.
Yeah.
I'm more of a book person. But
let me throw some really quick things at you that are a little bit less prefaced. Somebody said
I get angry.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, I do. I get angry.
At that topic, or just the long-winded questions?
No, I get angry about
of what it's become.
Yes. It's like, I know it had to change, but you have to go all the way into the gutter.
Yeah.
It's the same anger I feel what happened to our country. But we won't get into politics.
Yeah, I have a feeling I have a feeling we're in agreement with some things.
Yeah, it's like, how can you know that? You know?
Yeah. So
Anyhow.
So when some friends found out I was talking to you today, they wanted me to ask you some of the things that I didn't want to ask you because you're probably asked 6 billion times. Oh, tell me about the 80s and tell me about this and how great were the 80s and how but let me give you this one, and then I'll just throw a few of my own. Just your most given that you were very young and you're thrown into this world where you have access to rock stars and you're living in the epicenter of total debauchery at times, what was your most starstruck rock star moment?
I really didn't.
Or did you have one?
Yeah, I no. In a nutshell. Because it was part of our job, and because I'm a musician. I mean, and I was always around. I was either in a band or around musicians.
You just see them as people.
Yeah,
they're just people.
It wasn't like, probably the closest came. Martha and I both huge Beatles fans, right? And probably the closest that it came to that was Paul McCartney had a movie, Give My Regards to Broad Street. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember that well. There was MTV was very much behind that in 1984.
And so, we went to the premiere, and there was a big party, and of course Paul is there. And, we've interviewed everybody, between Martha and I and Alan, Mark, and JJ. And Paul McCartney was there, and both Martha and I, who are not like this, we turned into 12-year-old girls. Like, you go up and see him. No, you go up. No, you go up and say hi. No, you go up. And neither one of us could go up and say hi to Paul McCartney. That was probably the biggest thing but it's Paul McCartney.
Sure.
Sure. I was going to marry him. I changed, and I over the years, I loved George. George was closer to the type of person I am. But, when they first came out, I was marrying Paul. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Most girls were. And
I was a John and George. I was about John and George.
George. He's got the
best solo album of all of the Beatles.
George is the guy. George. I mean, all of them. But for me, he was closer to my soul.
Yeah.
But then years later, Martha got to interview him, and years later, after MTV, his manager had me host a press conference with Paul. So I got to actually, later on, meet him, and I was fine. That initial little girl thing, was not there at this press event, and I actually was speaking with him, and Linda was there, and he kept calling me Goldie because he thought I looked like Goldie Hawn, which was funny.
Oh, shit. Really?
Yeah. I mean, he was doing it on purpose. I mean, he knew my name. He just, how he personifies the word cheeky to this day. He's cheeky.
Yeah.
He's just cheeky. But I do remember after it was all over, he kissed my cheek. And I remember running to the payphones back then. It wasn't cell phones yet. And going, Paul McCartney kissed my cheek. It was like, did I ever think, when I was like, a little girl, he would kiss my cheek. I thought I was going to marry him. But that was the closest. But the one, and I was just talking about this earlier this morning, the person that I got excited about, not starstruck, but I thought was just kind of blew me away, was at the first Farm Aid. I was getting ready to go on stage. I think it was to introduce Joe Walsh, if I remember correctly. I'm standing by the side of the stage. It was in Indiana, I believe, somewhere in the Midwest. And Jesse Jackson walks up to me and introduces himself. And I'm like, Jesse Jackson knows who I am? It was more like that. It wasn't starstruck. It was like, wow. Because Jesse Jackson's Jesse Jackson.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it was like, wow, because you don't think, the Jesse Jackson is hanging around watching MTV. I mean, he's a legend.
Yeah, and he was very active in politics, and he was very much in the, I guess in September,
rights.
so Farm Age, September 85, a couple months after Live Aid. So yeah, that places him right in the center of his public.
That's right.
Because he ran again in '88.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just watching the stage, getting ready, for the stage manager to say, go, how they do it. And I'll never forget, he just walked up to me with his hand extended, as if I don't know he's Jesse Jackson. And it's a pleasure. I like your work. It was like, oh, I couldn't wait to tell my mom. It was like, wow. It was just really cool. That was a nice little thing,
Yeah. First concert you ever attended? Now, I'm sure this has got to be before MTV. Maybe growing up in Cleveland.
Yeah. Geez. First one was The Who. Back in Cleveland, Public Auditorium, and my high school sweetheart's older brother's band opened up for The Who. So I saw The Who, and then I think the second one was Cream, which was Cream and Canned Heat. Cream were like outrageously good.
Wow.
Bowie, right from the, I think I was second row. I mean, and tickets were so cheap, like $2 or something like that. The one I wasn't allowed to go see, though, I was too young, and my mom, I wanted to go see Hendrix, and my mother wouldn't allow it because, to quote her, he does naughty things to his guitar, unquote.
Sure.
So
it would have been the case with Elvis, too, if you 10 years before.
I was not allowed to see Jimi Hendrix, which I really wanted to, but other than that, I got to see just about anybody.
Yeah, Jimmy burns his guitar. Pete Townsend only breaks his, so you can go and see The Who.
Well, Jimmy, she was talking about his sexual...
I got you,
not
okay.
his burning of the guitar.
Sure.
Yeah, if he only burned the guitar, maybe she would have let me go, but it was the other. And the fact he even knew that is actually mind-blowing now that I'm telling you. How did she know that?
I don't know, because, again, there was no...
But she did, because I was not allowed to go to see Jimi Hendrix, but I got to see, anybody that I liked, basically, that went through Cleveland. And there was a cool place called La Cave in Cleveland that was actually underground. You'd take steps to go in. And the Velvet Underground used to play there a lot. And, I used to see them with a fake ID.
Damn.
Yes.
I didn't know, I figured, I thought, well, never mind. I'm not going to say anything. I was going to say, you're old enough to have seen the Velvet Underground?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, Cream. I said the same thing with Cream. I'm thinking all right, you saw The Who. I'm thinking maybe 1979 or something, but you saw The Who back when,
no. I grew up, like I said.
Wow.
I grew up with rock and roll.
Right, but I'm saying, you were a baby when you were on MTV.
Well, and I was a baby when I went to these places.
Wow.
I had a fake ID, and... they were really easy to get, and I was actually a really good kid. I really was, except for I did get a fake ID because I liked seeing bands and clubs I wasn't old enough to get into. And, I was friends with some musicians that were older than me by a couple of years. And we'd go to this La Cave. They had 3-2 beer, didn't even have... the real stuff, and, we'd sit in a smoky, cool place. And that's when I actually quit cheerleading because, obviously the acts are on the weekends, and if I had to cheer for football or see the Velvet Underground, I knew my priority, and I actually quit cheerleading so I could go see these bands. Yeah, well, I had my priorities on straight.
Rock and roll, baby.
Yeah.
All-time favorite album?
Oh, God, that's almost impossible. That really is.
Does it depend on the day?
I think the first one that just jumps in my mind, and I have actually a friend of mine, good friend of mine, gave me a frame of it, is Rubber Soul. I guess that would have to be.
Okay.
Yeah, I just loved Rubber Soul.
Band.
What?
Band and artist. All-time favorite band, all-time favorite artist.
Okay, I'd have to say, of course I love the Beatles.
Right.
The Beatles were the most influential on me growing up, no question. But, obviously they broke up, so they're not around. But a band that's still around that I still love are the Stones.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah, Stones, no question. I mean, Jagger, oh my God.
Yeah, to be doing what he's doing. There's no distinction in the way he moves now than the way he did in his 20s and 30s.
Not much. And I would put these, people go, I don't think that's retired. Oh man, It's like I would put Jagger up against a 20-something-year-old front man.
Yeah.
And he'd outdance him. I mean, he's like the rock and roll Baryshnikov.
He was actually much more constrained back in the 70s because he was constrained by a wire. He had a wire on his mic. So once microphones went wireless, it just kind of set him free to do. If you look at some of the footage of Jagger in the 70s, he's kind of more constrained. He doesn't go as crazy as he does now, or even in the last 30 years.
He's amazing, and my favorite musician. Because George is no longer with us. Mm-hmm. Keith, I mean, come on. Keith Richards is the personification of the term rock and roll.
Of cool, yeah. The embodiment of cool.
I mean, he is, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the guy. I mean, you cannot get, and the thing I like about Keith, he's really honest. He's not a guy that puts on, although he loves being Keith Richards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, he's so honest and he's really smart, and the stuff that comes out of his mouth, there's a book. I don't know if you're a Keith fan.
Big Keith fan.
I think it's either The World. It's a book that has all these different quotes, The Wisdom of Keith Richards, something like that. But it has all these different quotes from Keith over the years that apply to different circumstances.
Right.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah. So if you're a fan, you'll like it. But Keith Richards.
I love that little quote, and I don't know if it's written in the jacket of the book of the book Life, his autobiography. Where he
that's
said,
a great book.
I don't know if it was in a promo clip or whatever it was, but there's a quote, something to the extent of, "Believe it or not, I remember all of it."
Yeah.
And that says so much about him that, he's just not what we think he is in certain terms of who Keith Richards is and how we perceive him, in other words.
Yeah, I love the man. I absolutely love Keith Richards. And of course, you just asked for the very top. But,
I just wanted to throw some fun questions where you didn't. But you know what? It seemed like you had to think a lot about some of those things are really hard to come up with. We call that on Rock Under Fire. We call that gun to the head. It's called the gun to the head segment. I'm not a fan of guns, but it's the best name for it because it's almost like if somebody came up to you, held a gun to your head, and said, "Quick, favorite band," quick.
Well, yeah, that's
the Beatles
like
or the Stones,
Soul.
quick.
I mean, Rubber Soul, though, that is an accurate answer.
Yeah.
Although there's so many that I love.
Right.
But I mean, it was right as they were transitioning, from this poppy band. And they started being a little more experimental, but it was still very organic.
Yeah.
I just love.
I've always thought of those records, Rubber Soul and Revolver. I've always thought of as twins. They were just kind of they're so much alike in that sense that they were kind of like maybe the purest Beatles records, where they were still blossoming, they were still unfolding, and they were still kind of writing together before they kind of went out.
Yeah.
And started writing for themselves.
And it wasn't yet all the psychedelic stuff, and You know, it was still...
They were right on the cusp, you know?
Yeah, it was still... I think the pot was influencing it more than acid.
Yeah.
The pot era, or hash, you know, or I should say hash.
Yeah.
Hadn't gotten into the heavy psychedelics yet.
Yeah.
But starting to. Maybe a couple of doses, but not quite there yet.
Right. Bob Dylan hadn't taken hold of them just yet. Or actually, he had, but...
Yeah, well, he turned them on to pot, not psychedelics.
Yeah. So you figure Rubber Soul's late 65, Dylan's got Highway 61 out. So, you know, it was 66, I guess, where Revolver and Blonde on Blondes come out. Then it's a different story.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're now one of the major voices on SiriusXM. I'm one of those people that I avoid most of the Sirius programming, and I kind of immediately go to the beginning of the dial, and I go for the 70s and the 80s. You know, 70s on 7, 80s on 8, you know. And I grew up with CBS FM in my house, where my mother, who grew up on the doo-wop stuff, she was that was her oldies, and the 1950s were already, you know, 25 to 30 years in the past. We've become, and I mean you and me, even though we're separated by a few years, we've become the demographic for what constitutes the oldies now. So it's kind of bittersweet, because on the other hand, it's nice to go to the 80s on 8 and be surrounded by all these familiar voices and sounds of a time of actual originality and actual artistry, and just an overall collective sense of humanism, you know. And that nostalgia is a comforting and beautiful thing in an age when things are just so fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, and Nina Blackwood, your input is invaluable. You're a first-hand account to history, and that's why it was so important to have you help out with this episode. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me, and it was great. It was nice to talk to you.
Awesome.
Our favorite, one of our favorite subjects, rock and roll.
And we will be listening on the receiving end of the dial. Rock and roll, baby.
Yep, you got it.
Bad news, but only if you're out of me. Bad news, but only if you wanna be. You can lose, but I know how you love to win. Break my head down and pick me like a javelin. Whoa, you said we can't all be done. Bad news keeps pouring on me. Bad news keeps pouring on me. Bad news keeps pouring on me. Bad news keeps pouring on me.